to Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Liu Xin. Today, as usual, I'll dissect China-related stories from around the world and discuss with international friends to bring you the missing pieces of the China puzzle. Join us in real time by sending us a comment or question via the CGTN page on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube or Weibo. If you're watching us online or on the CGTN app, email us, or you can write to us at thepointwithalex@cgtn.com. We will be live streaming at 10:30 a.m. Beijing time every Friday, so get in touch and we might just feature your comments on the show. Before we start today's show, I'd like to share some special feedback from a Chinese-British viewer who immigrated to the UK as a child. The viewer wrote us a long, thoughtful email about last week's topic, the UK lorry deaths. Here are just a couple of sentences. I listened to your panel of speakers and I think the main point has been missed. The real fundamental problem with UK and other Western media's reporting is racial prejudice. The kind of misreporting of the Essex lorry nationality is tantamount to the racist attitude of they all look alike, so they must be Chinese. The underlying fundamental problem with the UK and other Western political elites and news media is the basic premise about China. This basic premise is that the China regime is evil, and the Western narrative is always written around this premise. I really appreciate this viewer's feedback and thank you for pointing out this critical racial prejudice factor, a red flag we should all remain alert about, whether we are journalists, police, or just everyday people. Let me also add that the latest investigation by the Essex police has confirmed that all of the 39 victims were Vietnamese nationals. We always welcome your comments, so please keep them coming. Now let's get started with today's discussion. The second China International Import Expo, or CIIE, kicked off in Shanghai on Tuesday. Despite instability in the global economy, exhibitors from around the world have jumped on the opportunity to attend the world's first import-themed national expo, which is even bigger than last year, a testament to the importance of the event for China and the world. The venue covers an area of 360,000 square meters. That's 20% larger than last year and roughly 5 times the size of the Louvre Museum in Paris. 64 countries, including China, signed up for the country exhibition, a 30% hike from last year, with 24 countries making their debut. Over 3,000 companies from 150 countries and regions have registered for the corporate exhibition, including more than 250 Fortune Global 500 companies. It's also worth noting that despite China-US trade frictions, 192 American businesses have signed up, 18% more than last year, and their space is the largest of all the countries. At last year's CIIE, almost $58 billion in deals for intended purchases of goods and services within a year were sealed. How many deals would be made this year? Let's wait and see. China is not only an advocate for an open world economy, but is also practicing what it preaches. In fact, China has already fulfilled many of the promises Chinese President Xi Jinping highlighted during the first CIIE. By the end of 2018, for example, the average tariffs rate decreased from 9.8% to 7.5%. According to the latest report of Doing Business 2020 released by the World Bank in October, China moved up 15 places in 1 year, from 46 to 31st in the ease of doing business rankings. Now, I acknowledge that to some, it seems that China has been taking quite a long time to further open up its economy and its market and level the playing field. But keep in mind, many Western markets have been practicing and perfecting their free market economies for hundreds of years in some cases. For China, it's only been 40 years since we first launched the Reform and Opening Up initiative. So please, have some patience with us. Of course, not everyone can practice patience, nor can they acknowledge the actions that China has taken over the last 40 years or even in this past year. Now let's look at our first headline, an article published by Reuters on November the 2nd titled, "On Eve of China Import Fair, EU Warns of Promise Fatigue." Promise fatigue. The term was cherry-picked from the EU delegation to China's CIIE and their press release. Catchy, yes, but a fair summary of the statement's points? I'm not so sure. The article opens by explaining its headline. The European Union said China should make rapid and substantial improvements to the business environment or risk promise fatigue. It adds that this week's CIIE is an attempt by the country to showcase its free trade credentials and that China has long been dogged by allegations of unfair trade practices and criticized for making promises to open its market and not delivering on them. Buried in paragraphs of pessimism, we get one positive point. The EU said in the statement late on Friday that European firms had provided positive feedback on the China International Import Expo last year and had increased sales or met new potential buyers. So the people who actually attended the CIIE were pleased. Good. In fact, if you read the actual press release of the EU delegation to the CIIE, you'll find plenty of positive points included up front. This headline is just one more example of how easy it is to extract certain phrases and points to suit the argument you want to make. Next, we have another Reuters article from November the 1st, China to use import fair to highlight trade credentials. Here, we see basically the same argument that China is using CIIE to ward off complaints about its trade practices. The first line claims China will use the CIIE to try to showcase its free trade credentials, temper criticism of its policies, and deepen its global economic influence at a time of fresh uncertainty over the China-US trade war. Well, that's a convenient angle if you want to make it sound as if China is caving in to international pressure to pry open the door to its market. But the thing is, Chinese President Xi Jinping announced the CIIE in May 2017, long before the US-China trade war broke out. Plus, China wants to bring in more imports for its own consumers, not because the rest of the world is pressuring China to buy more. CIIE provides a great opportunity for international companies, and it's also important for China itself, where boosting domestic consumption and offering more options to its rapidly expanding middle class is crucial. The article does do a good job of providing input from different perspectives, including both critics and enthusiasts, in addition to the president of the American Chamber of Commerce in Shanghai, a US embassy spokesperson, and the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson. One voice, however, stood out as a bit unusual to me. The article says, what foreign participant representing a company at a signing ceremony at last year's event told Reuters he was an actor paid to play the part of an executive? Well, so you are telling me that the 3,617 enterprises from 150 countries and regions and some 800,000 people who attended last year's CIIE, Reuters decided to feature the story of an unnamed source who claims someone paid him to be there. First of all, who knows if this person really exists? If he does, it is funny. But don't you think it would have been more informative to Reuters readers to share insights from someone who was actually at the CIIE to make deals, not drama? Your thoughts? Our last article appeared in the Wall Street Journal on October the 12th. The headline reads, America is losing the Chinese shopper. China was once eager to spend on US brands, then citizens of the world's biggest country shifted their allegiances. Where to begin with this headline? Well, the article starts with an example of how American brands like Oreo can no longer compete with local Chinese brands such as Three Squirrels, even though Oreo has created special flavors for the China market like seaweed-flavored Oreos, Oreo wasabi, and Oreo spicy chicken wing. For years, the article says, American companies look to China as a land of new opportunity. Now a new reality is settling in. The Chinese consumer isn't about to save the day for Western brands. Well, there are two reasons for this, according to the journalist. One is that local Chinese brands are getting stronger. The other is that Chinese consumers are increasingly turning away from foreign brands because they have run afoul of Chinese politics. The article adds, many American companies miscalculated how difficult it would be to gain a permanent foothold in a country that has turned toward patriotism. Well, first of all, the argument itself is rather weak. Rest assured, American companies are alive and well in China. Even the article itself says many Western companies are still thriving in China. Nike, for example, recently reported a 22% jump in quarterly sales in China to nearly $1.7 billion and has seen double-digit growth in China every quarter for the last 5 years. Beauty and personal care brands have also gained market share. So when I hear figures like $1.7 billion in sales, it sure doesn't sound as if American companies are losing Chinese shoppers, but some are losing. And one such example, indeed, is China's smartphone business. As the article says, in 2011, the article says that 70% of smartphone sales in China were from 3 foreign brands, Nokia, Samsung, and Apple. But in the first half of 2019, the top 3, Huawei, Oppo, and Vivo, were all Chinese, with 70% of the market between them. So what are the reasons, let me ask? Is it because of patriotism? Or is it because of Chinese friends that are offering better quality for a lower price? Second, even if some American companies are losing a foothold in China, what's wrong with that? Is it so wild to think that maybe Chinese people genuinely prefer Chinese brands in some cases, and it's not just because of what the article trumps up to be a rise in Chinese patriotism? For the companies that actually are struggling here, a word to the wise, maybe it is time to examine your own product's appeal in China rather than blame what you call nationalism. Maybe the sound of seaweed-flavored Oreos just doesn't appeal to anyone, not even to Chinese consumers. In any case, don't worry, China is opening its door wider and wider to international companies, investment and imports, and the CIIE provides a new platform for doing business with China. But also beware, the flip side is that competition is getting fiercer in China, so all countries, including the US, will have to bring their best or create what they didn't have. Send me your comments and thoughts or questions, and we'll ask my guests to comment on them when we come back after this.
An open platform to a market of close to 1.4 billion people. A new platform strengthening global economic cooperation. A progressive platform promoting innovative growth and inclusive development. Join CGTN and its integrated media teams as we take you to the second China International Import Expo in Shanghai. We'll show you how the expo reflects a new era of China's opening up, how it builds a shared future of global economic prosperity, and what this means for consumers, businesses, and policymakers. Only on CGTN.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference. Each day, there are millions of stories. Each one can open new perspectives, new possibilities. Wherever you look, we are there. To see, discover, explore. We put the pieces together to find what really matters to you, all around the world, all around the clock. Our reporters are at home across the globe. From our headquarters in Beijing and production centers in Washington, Nairobi, and London, China Global Television Network. Stories from across the globe, reaching people across the globe. CGTN. See the difference.
An open platform to a market of close to 1.4 billion people. A new platform strengthening global economic cooperation. A progressive platform promoting innovative growth and inclusive development. Join CGTN and its integrated media teams as we take you to the second China International Import Expo in Shanghai. We'll show you how the expo reflects a new era of China's opening up, how it builds a shared future of global economic prosperity, and what this means for consumers, businesses, and policymakers. Only on CGTN.
Welcome back to Headline Buster, a weekly segment of The Point with me, Liu Xin. So this week our topic has been the second China International Import Expo, and I dissected 3 articles, 2 from the Reuters and 1 from Wall Street Journal. So to discuss these topics and also to discuss maybe what I said and hear some comments from our international viewers, I have with me here in the CGTN headquarters Professor Jaime Flor-Cruz from Peking University, a former CNN bureau chief here in Beijing, and Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics. Gentlemen, welcome to the show again. Good, yeah. So I made a long monologue. I hope it was not too boring. First of all, any feedback? What are your thoughts on some of the things that I picked out from those reports? Was I being reasonable, fair, or was I being also maybe biased, maybe, or even wrong in my analysis? Any thoughts, Jaime? Or
okay, well, it's always tricky to just look at the headlines, right? And so I think that when you look at the coverage of the expo among the foreign correspondents reporting, you can always find fault in one or the other, because most of us, they try to cover it with on the one hand and on the other hand. Nothing is perfect, and there's always room for improvement, there's always room for criticism, and I think some of the stories that you cited have that. Is that fair? I think it's really up to the audience to decide if they're fair or if they're complete. It's the challenge for foreign correspondents in China is the story is so complicated, it's so complex. China is so big, whatever is true in Shanghai is not necessarily true in Ningxia or Beijing, right? And so that's one. How to capture the essence of the story is always a challenge.
Okay, so basically you're saying you have been right in your analysis, but people have their own judgment. Professor Liu.
I think it's fair enough. You have done a great job in really portraying your perspective over what is going on over there and also the significance of this expo. So yes, I also agree with my colleague is that we have to be inclusive in different perspectives. So the pros actually is very obvious. One is that, okay, China is really making efforts in narrowing the trade imbalance because we have trade surplus with 160 countries. This is really not sustainable if you look at long-term development of the global economic structure. And the other is that, okay, China is trying to shore up its consumption-driven economy, and China needs that, both on a business level and on a consumption level. So we need to import more and also more high-quality stuff. And third is, okay, the global community, some of them raise critics, well, this is more symbolic than substantive. Okay, do you welcome this symbol at least? So it's really a clear message. So both at the government level and business level, we are making these efforts, and we are providing at least one better option, another platform, apart from the Guangzhou Import and Expo. So, Nobody is really forcing you to come here to do a show.
Of course.
But come here with a serious business, and there are buyers, there are licensees, etc., waiting for you. So that's really fair enough.
So really, let's get the real message. I mean, why exactly is China putting so much attention on this expo? I mean, President Xi Jinping went there for a second time this year. Is it really just to send a message? Is it really just to show up some kind of trade credential, or really China is sending a very strong and doing and really delivering on the promises that it's making as well?
I think the crucial word is just. It's not just. It's all of them. I think it's fair to say
the problem I
that
had with many of these articles, or some of these articles, is that they seem to just take out the symbolic factor, highlighting again the soft power element, or that China is trying to show to the world a message. I mean, billions of I don't know how much money is spent, but it's a very expensive endeavor. Is it really just about keeping up the front and making China's image look good to the outside world? I don't think that's the case.
it's not only that, although it helps, right? It helps
of
China's
course.
image. It helps trade imbalance. It helps project China's image as a leading force in the international trade and commerce. I think it's all of them. We cannot dismiss one and say it's only just this.
Yeah,
right?
well, my problem, Professor Liu, jump in, please. But our problem, if you can, our problem has been that the international media, in their reporting, they seem to magnify maybe the side effects or the secondary effects of this event.
Well, the Guangzhou Import and Expo has been there for 126 times.
Yeah.
And why don't they receive so many critics?
Why?
And because it's really conducted on a normal, conventional pattern, and the fact that this Import Expo received criticism, the positive aspect is that the world are really looking at China. The world are looking at Xi Jinping and how he really addresses the issues, not only for domestic, trade imbalance issue, but rather how he really addresses the world economic order. So, receiving attention is the first, actually confirmation that you are powerful enough now. And then, look at, how China really was criticized during the Olympic game. So, I think at that time you were in Europe and seeing that, why do you really pass on the torch, all over the country, etc.
All over
the world. So China is there to show, yes, there is a symbolic meaning, and it is symbolic in that China has the confidence, and China is doing the contribution to the world. We want the whole world known. There is nothing wrong about that, but it's just the maturity level or the sophistication level as how to make the world feel more comfortable with China's rise, with China's contribution. So that's something we need to improve on.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very important aspect. But again, what I think our premise of the media critique has been the symbolic side or the negative side has been blown up too much, disproportionate to the real significance of this expo. But again, it's
I still want to jump. We all say, okay, Xi'an is already good enough, but we say, we can improve on something. There's something I do not feel
That's
this
the difference between
satisfied.
the international media and Xin herself. That's why we need to have both sides of the voice, and I definitely agree with that. So let's take a look at a comment that we have received from YouTube. Basically, the book by this person called the Book of Uncommon Sense. Okay, so it says, yes, Ms. Liu, but unfortunately, the open market that the West has been developing for 100 years is proving to be a failure. China would develop its own. So, yeah, your comment. Basically, is China following the wrong path by completely trying to, liberalize its market, liberalize its industry sectors? For instance, yesterday, the latest news is that China is going to completely lift the cap on financial investment, right? Is China stepping in the wrong footsteps?
Well, I think open market is the really solution for the whole world and also for China. So
unconditional?
Therefore, yeah, no, of course, it's not really unconditional, but of course there has to be a clear border between the role of the state versus the marketplace, and that but excessive intervention into the marketplace is always there to lead to a disaster. So China learned the lesson. So therefore, if you see all the achievements China has done, it is really through decentralization, deregulation, and not only there for domestic businesses, but also to further open the market for global competition, global participation. There can be some painful period, facing global competition, but China is able to stand up. So I think this is really the experience. So this message is really a little confusing. It seems that China's way that is deviating from open market is really providing a solution. But this is something I disagree.
You disagree, Jaime?
Yeah. But also, it also shows that the foreign media coverage of other economies and other countries are also, or can be, critical. I mean, not all of the coverage by the Western media about, say, the U.S. economy or the U.S. policies are positive, right? They also are critical of
there's
that.
the thing which we talk about quite often, and I say is the difference of the context. For the American readers, when they read about a piece critical of American politics, they have the context, they know what is really about.
Right.
But when they read a piece about Chinese politics, when it's very negative and very critical, there is the missing context that's that not helping to the understanding of this piece.
I think the coverage that you cited actually put the context of why the expo is significant. It happens at the time when the U.S. and China are locked in a trade war, and that China does have a lopsided imbalance of trade. And this is a solution to that.
True. No, when we were looking for the articles for this year's media critique, we actually had some difficulties because, first of all, there weren't so many articles, and secondly, most of them were actually quite fair and balanced. So we were picking really for bones in eggs in this case. But still, for every article, we thought that there were still some things that could be discussed. But let's take a look at another comment from this person by the name of Paolo Roberto. I don't care what the Western media say. I prefer to believe what my eyes are seeing. The CIIE is an amazing expo. If it was in Los Angeles, we'll have 24/7 coverage. What does that say?
It is really, I think China is really showing to the world they have so strong organizational skills in putting up big events in a safe, peaceful, and productive way. So from organizing Olympic to organizing G20, et cetera, China is really a great host in terms of the hospitality and also the organizational capacity.
Sure.
And on the other, it also shows that the world, while the world is trying to close the door for protectionism, China's government is really trying to support with the local government support and also with the participation of international communities, international organizations like UNCTAD, etc., WTO are really there to endorse this type of program.
Yeah,
so,
I was actually in both Expo last year and this year, and I saw exactly what you meant, the huge organization. I mean, so much effort is put in there, and you really wonder, is all of this just about changing the image or sending a message?
I think China needs to be self-confident, and that should show in your coverage as well as in China's pronouncements and behavior. Success speaks for itself, right?
Yeah.
It really doesn't matter what we, the Western media or the Chinese media, say. It's what people like them say.
But I think we have the feeling that, of course, success speaks for itself. But if you don't talk about what you're doing, other people will tell the rest of the world what you're doing, and that might interfere or hinder.
And also,
the success
as
story.
you said, you also provide the context for them to understand the message in the right way.
Yeah.
So,
Would such an expo be imaginable for the United States or for EU or for other countries? Do they have similar events, to your knowledge, Professor Liu?
well, I attended some of the expos globally, and at least, it's not really so well organized.
Also big.
Yeah, and of course, this is the biggest one. And I think just because of that, you receive some criticism because this is something that they cannot really compare. And the other is that, why do you highlight it? That, with even the service girls and volunteers are highly trained, and you have last minute closure over certain roles, etc. They feel, well, because you do it so splendidly, you must, have some agenda that is not really there to be disclosed. Actually, this is the way. This is the culture, and this is the political structure, and also this is how businesses are really being organized this way. So I think the better exposure, the better interaction will help them. Of course, for exhibitions, there is also a challenge, because right now there's online, online shows, etc. that can be fatigued. But the pledge China has made, it's not only Xi Jinping as a political leader, but also the business community is there. Is something that is substantial.
Yeah. Well, trade deficit is what the Americans, I only have very limited time, a trade deficit is what the Americans have been complaining about, but basically China is inviting deficit because we want to spend, we want to buy. Exactly what's the logic here, Jaime? Could you explain?
Well, it's as you said, it's very simple. To balance the trade deficit, China needs to buy more. And so China is trying to open its door to the sellers.
But China understands that buying does not mean losing.
No,
right? When you spend money, when you buy voluntarily, you are creating value for your economy. Or
that's correct, and it's not for everyone. I mean, to sell to China, you need to have deep pockets, and you cannot just plan to sell 1,000 tons of whatever, because that's not enough for China, right? So for small businesses, it's probably not the right platform for them. But still, it's a sincere effort, I think, on the part of China to open its door to sellers and help.
I think there's an awareness of the importance to letting small and medium-sized enterprises to be on board. I see some less developed countries having their country booth, and they actually pull some of their products and services that they can offer to the Chinese market through their country booth or through some kind of delegation or group exhibits, basically. We have to leave it there. Time is really limited. Many thanks to Professor Jaime Flo Cruz, former CNN bureau chief in China and now a professor with Peking University, and Professor Liu Baocheng from the University of International Business and Economics. And with that, we come to the end of this edition of Headline Buster, brought to you by The Point with me, Li Xin. Thanks for watching, and many thanks for the feedback and questions. Keep them coming. I'll see you next week at the same time. Bye for now.
So is this a weekly thing?
Yeah, this is every Friday morning.